This week on LTC News, celebrating Ghana's independence.
To be independence is the nicest thing under the sun.
The annual St. Patrick's Day dinner.
If you're not going to be back here next year as the city manager, I'm not going to be back here next year as the state senator.
And telling the Portuguese immigrant story.
And so it won't be lost. I mean, now we have the story.
Stay with us. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. Governor Charlie Baker came to town on March 15th to help City Manager Kevin Murphy host his fourth and final St. Patrick's Day dinner. Murphy has co-hosted the fun-filled event with State Senator Eileen Donoghue for each of his 4 years as City Manager. Proceeds from the event this year benefited the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association.
So Kevin Murphy, Kevin, we've had a team going for 4 years now, right? Well, longer than that, but up here at the dinner, 4 years. I don't know how I'm going to go on without you. And I want to tell you, if you're not going to be back here next year as the city manager, I'm not going to be back here next year as the state senator. Deal?
Our esteemed Governor Charlie Baker is here tonight. The governor is locked. Much better haircut than Tom Brady. The governor is locked in a dramatic head-to-head battle. No, not for re-election. He's battling Melania Trump to see who can get further away from Donald. Poor Governor Baker. It's been a tough year for the Republican Party. In fact, it's gotten so bad for the GOP that Dave Nangle might actually start endorsing Democrats again. Always a fierce advocate for Lowell High, the mayor continues to find ways to contribute. I know many of you have heard the difficulties we may have in building a new swimming pool. But thanks to Bill, we may have found a fundraising source. Starting at next Tuesday's council meeting, Trinity Ambulance has agreed to donate $100 for every time the mayor reminds us he's the former headmaster at Lowell High School.
Tom Golden talks, I wish you were here, because Tom Golden talks about that I have his grades as ex-head, I'll say it, headmaster, I'm sorry. Do I use that term? As much as I can. All right. I love it. We'll take it. Mr. Manager. Governor Baker, it's nice to see that you're here. You made it before our state reps. It's obvious you didn't take public transportation, so welcome to Lowell.
Can anybody here tell me what the difference is between God and mighty man? I'll tell you what it is. God doesn't walk around UMass thinking he's mighty man.
And I'm not going to make fun of anybody up here because I don't know what you do. But judging from what I've heard, neither does anybody else in the room.
And now the City Council synopsis for the March 20th meeting. Mayor Samaras announced the 3 finalists for the Lowell City Manager position being left vacant when current City Manager Kevin Murphy retires as of April 1st. The finalists are Eileen Donoghue, a Lowell lawyer and state senator; Linda Millsaps, a research director for the North Carolina Center for County Research; and James White, an assistant dean of finance at the School of Science at MIT. Many are said to believe that Donoghue is a shoo-in for the position. Councilor Rita Mercier suggested that interviews would be a waste of time. Most councilors disagreed, stating that the interview process is important. After some discussion, the majority decided to proceed with interviews on Tuesday, March 27th at 5 p.m. The council will elect a new city manager later that evening at the city council meeting. Councilor Karen Cirillo reported from an earlier Arts and Culture Subcommittee meeting that the Cultural Organization of Lowell, or COOL, is working on a phone app that will highlight up to 50 walking tours around the city. A final motion for the evening requested that the City Council set up a special meeting with the Lowell School Committee to discuss the safety of our public schools in light of the recent shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida. The school committee is responsible for school safety, while the city is responsible for police and fire departments. A meeting will allow the various departments to share procedures and come up with a plan should such an event occur here. On March 6, 1957, the West African nation of Ghana won its independence from Great Britain. The anniversary continues to be a day of great celebration within Ghana and around the world. Here in Lowell, the Ghana immigrant community celebrated with its annual flag-raising ceremony at City Hall. Gordon Hom, the director of the African Community Center of Lowell, came in to speak with LTC intern Morgan Joubert about the significance of the event.
This gone Saturday, which was March 10th, actually our independence falls on March 6th. But knowing the city that we live, Monday to Friday is a busy time to, folks to go to work. So we choose Saturdays to do our flag raising. And this gone Saturday was the 16th annual event of the Ghana Independence Celebration.
Of a country. Give them insight, give them direction, lead them and guide them to do what is good for the country.
And it's a celebration that Ghanaians, no matter where you are, we will look up to the day 6 March when we got the independence.
God has programmed for each nation. God has programmed for each town. God has programmed everything, even for the stars and sky in the sky. God has programmed everything.
To be independence is the nicest thing under the sun. So that day, we're all proud, and we come out with our full colors and give our best to our country.
We were the first country to gain independence in sub-Saharan Africa, so we are a beacon of democracy.
Ghana has come a long way. We have made tremendous progress, but there are still yet challenges ahead.
So it began with Ghana fighting for its freedom, Africa fighting for their freedom. You have all the European nations there. Africa is viewed as a huge continent with huge human resources as well as natural resources. This brought the attention and the envy of the rest of the world to concentrate in colonizing the continent in order to gain their own interests.
It's been a long journey, but through the sacrifices of our forefathers, they set the pace for us. They laid down their lives, and they gave us this opportunity.
In the words of Reverend Martin Luther King, we may have all come from different ships, but we are all in one boat.
Remind the family, and especially our children, that we have a great heritage, and to get them to be part of it and integrate them into the community.
Many people may be familiar with the story of Irish immigration into Lowell and their work in building the canals, or that of the French Canadians who carved out their little Canada in the city. Lesser known is perhaps the Portuguese immigration story, and a new exhibit at UMass Lowell helps fill in the gap. The exhibit, called Immigration from the Atlantic Islands to Lowell, was designed by UMass Lowell students and was curated by distinguished professor Robert Ferrant.
The exhibit's important because the typical story that gets told a lot in Lowell is there was Irish immigration, French Canadian immigration, and then there's not much else. The story sort of stops. There's not as much in the park exhibits, there's not as much around town, and yet Portuguese immigration was incredibly important the latter part of the 19th, the first part of the 20th century, as was Greek immigration, as now is Cambodian immigration, or lots of immigrants and refugees coming from other places in the world. And if we're truly going to be an immigrant city in that sense of embracing who we are, then we need all those stories told. And so when I was asked to do it, I thought, okay, this is good, because it's another story we're going to document in very rich detail, and so it won't be lost. I mean, now we have the story. So a lot of the work, finding the material, The images and doing the historical research was done by students from the university, two history students at the university, Katie Phelps and Molly Mahoney. They went to the JFK library and found some documents, scoured old newspapers, records of the International Institute, and then just recently graduated student Kelly Freitas did all the design work for all the panels. So for me, it's like what I love to do. I love working with students doing hands-on. I think one of the ways that history majors learn how to do research is to actually do real research with a deadline, a customer, so to speak, and a purpose. There's basically three waves of Portuguese immigration into the city of Lowell. There's a wave in the late 19th, early 20th century. So that's when Portuguese immigration, several thousand people, come to New England, and thousands of them end up in Lowell. They're coming largely for mill work. In the 1950s, there's another wave of Portuguese immigration, largely caused by a volcano on one of the Portuguese islands. It destroys the Portuguese economy. One of the things the students found is a letter that Firmo Carrera, a Portuguese immigrant who's already living in Lowell, writes to John F. Kennedy when he's a senator, saying we need to do something to let Portuguese immigrants into America. That's explaining the volcano. And there's a quota system in place then, so not a lot of people could come in. Kennedy right away jumps into action, and he and another senator from Rhode Island get the laws changed. And so there's a number of Portuguese immigrants that come into Massachusetts, some to Lowell, and they're sort of thought of as volcano immigrants. And then when immigration reform comes in the 1960s, there's a third big wave of people coming in at that point. Throughout Lowell's immigration history, the overarching sort of glue that sticks all these stories together is looking for a better life for your kids. That's really, when you scratch the surface, that's the motivation.
The exhibit closes on March 30th and will travel to UMass Dartmouth before returning to Lowell for more local showings. Over 100 volunteer readers came out on March 10th to celebrate Jack Kerouac's birthday with a marathon reading of his most popular novel, On the Road. It took almost 12 hours of continuous reading to complete the book.
And this was really the way that my whole road experience began. And the things that were to come are too fantastic not to tell.
Thank you. Nebraska, I ain't got no use for. Why, in the middle 1930s, this place wasn't nothing but a big dust cloud as far as the eye could see.
I wandered out like a haggard ghost, and there she was, Frisco. Long, bleak streets with the trolley wires all shrouded in fog and whiteness.
And I tried to tell him what North Platte meant to me, buying the whiskey with the boys, and he slapped me on the back and said I was the funniest man in the world.
She gave a furious look at Dean and Roy Johnson. It was Tommy Snark who did it this time.
We hit a complete left turn in the highway, and Dean socked the wheel over to make it, but the big car skidded in the grease and wobbled hugely. "Look out," yelled Dean.
The Pollard Memorial Library hopes to make this an annual event. Ribbon-cutting ceremonies are more than just formalities. They are an official welcome and recognition to companies that choose to do business in the city. Tech companies that move to Lowell help stimulate local economic growth, provide jobs, add to the tax base, and boost the vitality of the area. On March 1st, a ribbon-cutting ceremony at Next Shift Robotics officially opened their new facility on Pawtucket Boulevard in Lowell.
As we become part of the future, as we support innovative companies that are innovative, that means a great future for the people who live here, who work here, who want to have a good job and want to have a good life.
I'm thrilled that Next Shift has chosen Lowell for its headquarters and a place that it will grow and develop autonomous warehouse robots.
You actually represent companies that we are seeking to come to Lowell. You actually represent our future, and we're excited about that.
By the way, I can't wait to meet your robot. I don't know if it has a name.
Robots like Clarence are part of an automated warehouse system designed by Next Shift Robotics for an e-commerce order fulfillment process.
How many people here order online? Online has gone from fad to commonplace. And in doing so, the warehouses are trying to move forward and keep up with what they need to do to get orders out to you and I quickly.
Normally, when an order comes in, a warehouse worker known as the picker locates the merchandise and carries it to the shipping department. Next Shift Robotics' patented workflow automates much of this process.
So it's a very simplistic system. The robot takes the tote, walks it over to the product aisle, drops it off. A picker adds items into the tote, and then the robot moves the tote either to shipping or to another spot in the product aisles. The robot's doing all the heavy lifting. It's picking up that heavy tote, it's moving it from one spot to another. And the picker is able to just maintain his particular area where he's adding items to totes. When it goes around a person, it goes at half speed, so that it's a polite robot.
We have another piece of software in which you can see the real-time working of the robot. You have the three cameras, and also it shows where the robot is going, and it has about 4,000 probes that you can use to look at how the robot is performing. Are the motors performing well? Are the sensors performing well?
When you think about the history of Lowell and to have the innovative nature of this company with robotics, it's part manufacturing and part wave of the future, how you're going to move those goods out into the public. I think it's terrific, and we're very pleased that they chose Lowell.
Having a university in town helps provide a workforce of graduates, and attracting tech companies makes good economic sense for the city. In this week's SunSpot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott sits down with City Councilor and State Senate candidate Rodney Elliott.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Scott, the Enterprise Editor at The Sun. Thanks for tuning into this week's edition of SunSpot. With me today is City Councilor Rodney Elliott. Rodney, you've been in that chair a couple times now, right? I think you're a repeat guest.
Sure.
Rodney is hoping, Councilor Elliott is hoping to maybe shed that title and pick up a new one. As the city manager's job changes here in Lowell. Sure. Rodney, it's been known now for a while that Kevin Murphy will be resigning April 1st.
Right.
And State Senator Eileen Donahue, who represents the 1st Middlesex District, is indeed an applicant.
She is an applicant.
And we'll see if she does indeed get that job. I think we can both agree that the stars do seem aligned. Sure. But even before Eileen came out and said she was an applicant, you were out, I think maybe two weeks prior, saying that you are very interested in that state Senate race.
Sure. So
if you could just take us through your thought process about what prompted you to do that, and then maybe a week later you came out and said you are indeed a candidate.
Right. So I think a number of things. If you look at the last before Kevin Murphy was a candidate for city manager, at that time I believe Senator Donahue had expressed an interest. So following perhaps the election and Kevin's notice, I think Senator Donahue has always expressed an interest, and I think that's important. So I mean, moving forward, she is an applicant, and as I have always stated,
the suspense was over.
I think it's important to have someone from the community to be a chief executive officer. I think they have a vested interest. I think they're here day in and day out, and all things being equal, qualifications certainly at the top of that list, and experience as well. I think that candidate, in my eyes, always should be given great consideration. So
let's just stay on that just for 1 second, then we can move on to your candidacy. There's been some grumbling in some quarters here in the city that it wasn't an open process, that the minute Eileen Donahue expressed interest, that she basically had the votes lined up to become city manager. Let's be honest. It's no different, correct, than when John Cox became city manager. There was a little curveball when Bernie Lynch became city manager, and then when Kevin Murphy became city manager. These candidates, they lined the votes up prior. Otherwise, they would not get into the race. Can you address that and maybe clear the air on that?
Yeah, sure. I think that people have certain requirements, certain interest or qualifications, if you will. I think it's similar to the way countries, pick their prime minister. There's an election, you run on a platform, you run on issues, and that governing body picks their prime minister. Now, we're not picking the prime minister of a country, but it is a chief executive officer here in the city of Lowell, and clearly candidates. Honestly, I think Eileen, Senator Donahue, I've served with her for quite some time. She was the mayor. She did a great job in bringing people together, and she's a hard worker. So I think she should be given full consideration. But I do think we should go through the process. I would be...
Even though the votes are there.
Well, I've never committed to her. I've had one conversation with her, as we chatted about, and she just expressed interest in it. She didn't ask for a vote. She just, we chatted about the requirements of the job or the day-to-day responsibilities. So I think that she would like to be considered, just like all the other candidates. And whether they line the votes up or not before or after, that's it remains to be said. I think there are, again, people certainly can look at candidates and have an interest in it, and I think that she is one of those candidates.
Let's talk about your candidacy.
Sure.
Why do you want to run for state senate? You've been a city councilor now for, geez, I would guess what, 18 years maybe? Or 16 years?
Time goes by, so it's been 21.
21, okay. So why do you want to leave the city council and serve in the state senate? What is it about the state senate?
Well, what's interesting is Lowell, for 21 years, as you mentioned, I've served in the city council and I've been the mayor. And one aspect of Lowell's progress, in my opinion, is having strong leadership on Beacon Hill. Clearly, having strong leadership as a city manager and city councilors to provide that stewardship on the local level is important, but also that second component is to have strong leaders on Beacon Hill. And what's interesting is you look at, just for the Senate, for instance, and the House delegation has always had strong leadership on Beacon Hill to bring home resources, to file bills, to take care of the district. And I think the Senate has done the same with Senator Donahue and Senator Panagiotakis, and going back to, perhaps Shea and Sheehy, that, interestingly enough, they cut their teeth right here in local government, whether there's a school committee or city council here in Lowell. And I think it is a great breeding ground, if you will, because you understand the issues, certainly in the city. I have experience in Groton as the administrative assistant for 3 years.
Was that in 1961?
Yeah, that was way back when.
That was way back, yeah.
It was way back when. So it was, I feel I have a very firm understanding of local issues, certainly here in the city. I understand issues in the towns. I've been out to town selectmen's meetings and talking with folks. But, what are the issues? Why am I running? Local aid.
Before we get on to the issues, I want to get back to those. It could be a very interesting race. You've come out and said you are a candidate.
Right.
It's widely expected that one of your colleagues, Ed Kennedy, will also be a candidate.
Sure.
Then there's even speculation going down a little bit deeper that John Leahy might get into the race. And then there's Bill Martin, who you also served with, a former city councilor, who said that he might be interested in that race. Yeah. Boy, that would be a humdinger of a race if the four of you were in that race.
Yeah, it certainly would. I mean, that's what the process is all about. And
what kind of race do you think that would be?
Well, I think there'd be clearly a lot of competition for votes in the city, but then you go out to the towns, and that's why I've been in the towns. I still know lots of folks in the town from, certainly with my job as Brownfields coordinator and city councilor, and it's about relationships and building relationships. I mean, I'm running because I feel that what I can bring is I'm going to be a full-time full-time state senator. I quit my job, I quit the city council, and
you would leave the city council if you were elected, even though you wouldn't be. I believe you wouldn't be required.
No, you're not required to. No, but I don't think that's. I don't think it's fair. I think people are going to elect a senator that is going to be full-time. I would do things like have an office in City Hall, which many state senators do. I would have office hours in the town to let towns folks know that they have a senator they can talk to. So, and I think that's important. I think more importantly, I know the appropriation. I know the legislative process, and I've worked there many years ago.
Phil Shea, right?
I started I started working as a legislative assistant on the Committee on State Administration, and that's part of it. But the second part of it is the appropriation process. Where's the money? And I will say, I don't think anybody knows the budget better than I do. Knowing how to file language, insert language for certain projects. I mean, some priorities that we'll probably get into a little bit later, but bringing home funding. This community, this state has the success is private, state, local partnerships, and the delivery system from way back when, bringing home resources.
Would you say that is probably one of your biggest strong points is your ability to look at a budget and know the appropriation process?
Yeah, I think that's a strength, but also as the mayor, I feel that I clearly have demonstrated leadership skills of bringing people together and take on initiatives and meet with some success. Whether that was the opiate task force a number of years ago, to bring officials in one room that continues to meet, by the way, or the Blue Ribbon Commission for the Smith Baker Development, Economic Development. I have the Branch Street fire when the city and not me, but I led the effort to raise $300,000, and I think that was a step with that community that showed that the rest of the city cares about you. People from all walks of life donated money to them, and I have to tell you, from the community perspective, that was a big step to say we all care, we're all one.
You're certainly well known in Lowell, and you mentioned earlier that you worked in Groton quite a while ago. What are you doing to raise your profile in Westford, Pepperell, Tingsboro, and Dunstable, and even Groton? The other communities in that district.
Sure. No, I'm going to selectmen's meetings.
Are you actively campaigning?
Yeah, I've been out in selectmen's meetings. I was in Tingsboro Monday. I was at the Groton Dunstable School Committee meeting last night. There was a joint meeting with the Finance Subcommittee.
So are you going just as a candidate, just to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think that's where you learn about the issues. I get very good response. I feel very, people appreciate that fact that you're going and sitting in a 2 and 3 hour meetings. I've been at Pepperell meeting, selectmen's meetings, excuse me.
So you've been Tingsboro, Pepperell, Groton, Dunstable?
Groton Dunstable School Committee meeting, and that was last night. That was an interesting meeting. Interestingly enough, they're talking about the school building authority process. They need to replace one of the elementary schools.
Well, you know a lot about that.
Yeah, so it was, they had the presentation, and I just sat quietly and then introduced myself. But to me, the response has been very humbling, and they appreciate the fact that you come out and take time to go out to the towns, on nights, sometimes snowing. Sometimes
now, you're currently an employee of the State Department of Conservation and Recreation.
Correct.
Correct. What is your title there?
I am the Capital Budget Director.
Okay.
So when I say I know the appropriation process, I work with Administration and Finance and the Secretariat developing. It's a $130 million capital budget.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we only have 2 minutes left.
Sure.
Are you planning to? Can you keep that job?
No, I will not. Absolutely not.
So what's going to happen in those regards? Are you going to resign from your state job?
Yes.
To campaign full time for this?
I am required. I can't run as a state employee, but you can't raise any money. So it's frustrating. It's not frustrating. That's the law, and that's the way it is. So you set up a campaign finance team, which I have, about 22 people, and they go out and they raise the money for you.
Okay. Yeah. So what is your stat? Are you going to be leaving your state job, or are you going to keep that job?
No, I would keep my job. I'll take a leave of absence for probably 2 months at the very least.
Okay, as the campaign kicks in?
As a campaign. I think it's important to campaign, full time.
Who's the head of your finance committee? Your 22...
Well, the treasurer is Lee Machado.
Okay.
There's a whole list of folks from across the city, and I'm grateful that they allowed to put their names on.
So you've already got people. You've already got a
absolutely.
A campaign going.
It's important to begin to mobilize. I feel it's going to be a very, while it's 6 months away, seemingly it'll be a short campaign season, knowing that the primary is September 4th. It's the day after Labor Day.
You don't envision a special election?
I don't envision a special election.
Right.
No, I wouldn't want to put that cost on the people in the city of Lowell, because it would be a primary and a general, only to have a primary and then a general in September. So it doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, we were able to get inside your head a little bit to find out why you're doing this, and next time there's lots of times to discuss issues. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to get into that today, but we'll be doing that, particularly as more candidates get in the race and we schedule some debates and that type of thing. So, Rodney, thanks for coming. Good luck with your campaign.
That's it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 899, online at ltc.org, or get the link on Facebook. I'm Alanna Flood. Thanks for joining us. LTC programming is supported by